So, hello, welcome back to another stream and also another episode of the Self-Development with Tactics podcast. Today, we're going to talk about value, why we give value to certain things that we're actually doing so, and what's the stories that we're telling ourselves, which is highly correlated with this topic, actually means for us, and how we could potentially also use it for something rather good. But more as always after the intro. And I do hope with the stream everything is fine. It kind of should be, I guess, I assume. I expect. Oh, this really sounded weird. So, value. Giving value, telling ourselves stories, and so on and so forth. So, we tell ourselves a lot of stories. I know stories that might be based on us being a particular person. You know, I am a fat guy, for example. This is a pretty good example of a story that is definitely not serving us and it's definitely not good for us. On the other hand, there's also stories that are actually pretty good. I mean, I am a successful person. I am something. I value something. These are all stories that we're telling ourselves, and something that is highly interesting is that when we buy something, when we acquire something, if you will, then this is also really neatly and tightly stuck to a certain story that we're telling ourselves, which then also means that when we are indeed buying something and we're spending a lot of money, especially on something, then that this is also a story, you know. The money we pay for something, this in the end kind of represents the value it has. Which is really weird and really interesting, you know, which for people that are in an industry of, you know, working with clients, doing something for somebody, you know, whether it is B2B, well, more or less B2B, but in the end also B2C is B2B, because in the end you're working for somebody or you're working with somebody, that when you're doing something for a particular person, then probably it is, you know, it really depends on the context, and it really also depends on the business and the person and so on and so forth. But charging them a high price lets them think a different way about the product and or the service they are receiving. You know, they're telling themselves a different story just because of the price. You know, just because the stuff is priced differently, which is really weird. But thinking about that makes sense, you know. Of course, when I'm buying something luxurious, then it should also be relatively expensive, just because it is luxurious, and that I can tell myself the story of, okay, I bought something expensive, I bought something luxurious, I bought something maybe not everyone is able to acquire, and so on and so forth. So the stories in terms of, you know, business-wise, that we're telling ourselves and also that we're telling to other people are incredibly important and also incredibly powerful. Since, I mean, if I'm, for example, talking to a client and I'm like, okay, you know, this is, you know, such a good product and whatnot, and it is fucking cheap, well, is it then really a good product? On the flip side, you know, just doing it the opposite way might just be smarter. But as I said before, it highly and heavily depends on the context, and it highly and heavily depends on the product, yourself, and also the other person, of course. When somebody's just really willing to get something cheap, well, then, you know, this is probably also the story that you're going to tell them. Like, okay, these are the downsides of the cheap product and these are the upsides of the good product. Anyway, we value something more that we have, you know, and there are a few theories of, you know, why this might be the case. The one that I like the most, even, you know, the other one I just, you know, didn't really pay that much attention to, because this was the first thought that I had, is we could lose it. If we have something, we value it more just because we can lose it. And, you know, back in the days, it's to, you know, depends on what we're talking about, but this could really be detrimental. Of course, losing something hurts more and is more painful than gaining something is pleasurable. And I've been talking about that before, like, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, I assume. And is it also the same with relationships? This is kind of a question that I then ask myself, like, if I am in a relationship, do I value it more just because I have it, kind of? do I value this person more just because I quote unquote have this person? And on the flip side, when you're valuing something, when you're having something, you just talk more positively about this particular thing. And you might have also seen that as well, and you might have also quite heard it as well, that when somebody talks about something that they have bought and whatnot, relatively rarely, it depends on the product once again and also the context, but relatively rarely do they really talk negatively about that. There might also be some other stories tied to that, like, okay, I've paid a lot for that, so I make myself believe, or I in general paid for it, so I make myself believe that it's been a good buy. On the other hand, I do also feel like and see that people could be kind of balanced in terms of, okay, I bought this particular thing, it is good on one hand, but there's also some downsides. But I would never quite say, or pretty seldomly, that something they bought, something they have, is just actually complete shit, quite. This is, on the other hand, also tied to the ownership effect or mere ownership effect, which just states, should I get it? I do not remember what I meant there, but something that's, the first thought of losing it, people talking positively about something they have, leads me to something that I have recognized and seen in interactions and communications and conversations that other people had with other people, not necessarily with myself. But when somebody's having something and you talk shit about that, and the person is having that, this is a really bad move. Because the person probably values this particular thing actually relatively highly, in terms of it is not complete shit for them, even if it is balanced out. But of course, saying like, okay, I really believe that this and that and these and those is quite shit, well, it's not going to be good for their ego. It's not going to be just letting them feel really well. Let me actually just quickly check the mere ownership effect, just because I do want to head on that. Effect refers to an individual's tendency to evaluate an object more favorable merely because he or she owns it. Okay, I see. Oh, this is why I thought about should I get it, which was my thought of when you're buying something new, and it is probably going to be like, I don't know, a car, for example, a product that you may not necessarily need, you can lose, and it really hurts when you lose it. So when you buy something, you should be, or actually could be, aware of the fact that you're going to value it more just because you have it. And maybe this is going to make your life a bit more difficult in the future, because you're having this particular thing and you do not want to throw it away just because it is yours, you do not want to lose it, and you're just, to some degree, of course, depends on the person once again, might be emotionally attached to this certain product. Then ask yourself, is this then a good idea? And you could also ask, do I really need that? Which in the real end could, lead to less drama in the future, but also less expenses in the future. So it's quite a win-win situation, asking two relatively simple questions. So is it serving me? Can I tell myself a better story? This is now a reference to the whole story part of the whole thing. Is a particular story that I'm telling myself, for example, the story of I am a smoker. Is this story, this identification that I'm having, which by the way makes it really, really, really difficult for me to stop smoking just because it is my fucking identity, does this really serve me? Is this really something good to tell myself? Is it really something useful for my life, for me as a person, and so on and so forth? So observe the stories that you're telling yourself. And this may be easy, this may actually be also quite difficult, but the things that you're basically saying to yourself, okay, I cannot do this because of X, because I am X, or X, Y, and Z and whatnot. Simply by observing that and noticing, I do actually just realize something rather. Anyway, you yourself telling that, is it useful? Observe the things that you're telling yourself, observe the things that you're talking to yourself also about, what are the topics, what apparently is important for your subconscious at the time, which probably changes. And can I tell myself a better story? When I see a story that I for sure know this and know that it is not smart to think that way, could you just do it differently? Could you just tell yourself a different story? Of course, it is not like, okay, I am a smoker, and then when I say, okay, I am not a smoker, then I'm all of a sudden going to stop fucking smoking. No, this is not necessarily the case. Well, it's for sure not the case, maybe for some people, but this is then really an exception. But we can't lie to ourselves. Our subconscious is way, 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 way too strong for us to be able to just convince ourselves by lying that something is the case. This is just not going to be, it's not going to work out, period. And other people like Andrew Huberman, they also have been talking about that and have been talking about the fact in a bit of a different context, but still, you cannot lie to yourself and expect that things are going to happen then, all of a sudden, magically appearing and stuff. So, consciously using a false story might actually also be pretty interesting. Okay, what if I tell myself a certain thing? Maybe by just really not quite overdoing it, like, okay, I'm a smoker, and then all of a sudden I start smoking. But there's something pretty crucial about this statement. Okay, I am a smoker, so I must start smoking. On the one hand, I'm having a thought. I'm a smoker. It is a mere thought, there's nothing more, nothing less to that. But on the other hand, I'm also having an action. Okay, I start smoking. I do something, I actively participate at whatever I'm doing. And it is pretty crucial, because when I'm seeing that there are certain thoughts and certain stories that really do not serve myself, I can act against them, because I'm having the thought and I'm having the action, And there is a connection, but you kind of independently act on both of them. Once you're having a thought, or on one hand you're having a thought, and on the other hand you're actually doing something. And about doing something, you can actively work against that. I'm a smoker, but I'm just not gonna smoke. And maybe, and this is just thought that I haven't written it down, I haven't done research on it, but by changing your behavior, probably also your belief system is gonna change. When you work out a lot, you probably think more about the fact that you might just be an athlete. Whereas before, where you just have been sitting on the couch, have been doing nothing all day long, you probably were not thinking that you are an athlete. And so this might actually be a really great way to build those stories. Therefore, of course, also some habits, but observe the stories that you're telling yourself, observe whether they are serving you, and if they're not serving you, then act against them. Try to convince yourself, convincing yourself is probably the wrong word, but try to build better habits, try to just, kind of outwork and outact those thoughts, because they are merely thoughts. But the problem is thoughts quite often are followed by action, and then this is the problem. The action is the problem, not necessarily the thought, even if it is the catalyst of the action. So, of course, working on the root, of the whole thing often makes sense. But I don't know. As I said, as far as I know, just lying to yourself and just this, what is it called? Well, yeah, basically lying to yourself is not going to work out fairly well. And so in the end, I've been, talking fairly often now about I am statements. I am a smoker. I am something. And this is identification, as I've mentioned before, and throughout the years, as I've been thinking about habits, reading about habits and whatnot. Also, Atomic Habits, actually pretty good book, and also pretty great site by James Clear. Yes, I think that he's also still having, I don't know, book summaries on his site, but still also some excerpts out of his book. Really interesting and also really useful. And those I am statements, they are really dangerous. When I'm saying I am an athlete, well, this is something that I believe, apparently, and I am that, and this is who I am. And of course, changing something, and in terms of an athlete, should probably change that, but I am a smoker. This is your identity. This is who you are. And of course, changing that is going to be way more difficult than saying, okay, I am a person that smokes. Period. I am a person. This is a fact. I am a person, but I also do smoke, you know? This is my action. Maybe this just also makes it more clear subconsciously that this is the action is the problem, you know? But of course, it makes also sense, as I stated before, to also think about the thought and change that thought, at least try to change that thought by observing it and kind of realizing the, detrimental effects this can have on you. On one hand, and also on the other hand, just, realizing that it is just a thought, it's just something that is in my head and going on. And, is this really the truth? Is this really who I am? Is this really what I do? And well, apparently it is, kind of, because I am doing those things my brain is telling me that I am doing. So this might be the case. Anyway, so think about them. Also think about pricing to kind of, have a little bit of a conclusion, a little bit of the summary of the whole thing. Still, crazy sound. And do not talk negatively about things other people have. At least really be conscious about the fact that they might be pretty closely attached to this particular thing, and they might then go into ego mode and be like, well, I think it is actually pretty good, and I think it is actually this and that and these and those, just because they have it, just because of the mere ownership effect. And also think about your finances and what you buy and what you do not buy in terms of, is this going to make my life easier in the future, just because the mere ownership effect is going to kick in, and am I going to be able to get rid of it without feeling bad about it, and so on and so forth, and also other thoughts that I for sure know you're going to come up with. But yeah, with that being said, I'm going to see you the next time. Bye bye.